You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Good morning, Robert. Welcome to the Modern People Leader. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Daniel. I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful Tuesday here in Atlanta and excited to be with you two this morning.
It's beautiful in Austin. It has been a unusually warm fall, and we got a storm yesterday. So today's like the first day that it feels fallish for me. So it's also beautiful here. Well, we were introduced by our mutual friends, Kunik. We've done a lot of work with Kunik, and we love what they do. And through association, I was introduced to you, and you have such an amazing story, and we want to dig into as much of it as we can today. You know, we're taking somewhat of a different format. You know, we are taking a conversation that you've had, and we are trying to apply it to the podcast format. It will all reveal itself when we get a little further into the conversation. But are you ready to do this today?
Listen, I'm always ready as we get into the talk. That's one of the principles, right? I'm very excited and looking forward to being one of the first in a new format. So let's do it. Daniel, are you ready, my friend?
Awesome.
I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, let's go. The first tradition we have on the show, we kick every episode off the same way. It's called Good News Stories. We share a work or a personal related story that we want to just kick things off with a little positivity, maybe a little gratitude. We prefer for our guests to go first, so we will hand it over to you if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the good news story. As I've listened to your episodes in the past, I think it's a wonderful way to, like you said, kick it off with a positive, bite. So my good news story. Wow, it's been an interesting. I just got back from vacation. That's a good news personal story. But what I will say, good news from a personal perspective, the reminder to take time to reset, reflect, and reimagine. We have about 6 more weeks left in this year, and they're going to go by like that before we know it. And excited and grateful to have been able to take some time to step away, to truly disconnect so that I can end rested so we can start the new year strong. So from a personal perspective, just for me, the good news is being able to and encouraging people to be sure to step away, right? You may not be able to step away for a week, or you may not be able to step away for several days, but if you can take an hour, a day, a few days, a week, whatever you have the ability to do, please take that. So for me, my good news story is I'm feeling refreshed, I'm excited, and I'm ready to finish the year strong so we can start the new year strong. I don't know if that was a good news story or more of a selfish gratitude moment.
That sounds like good news to me. I'll take it from there because I'm a big believer in the cycles of life, and we are entering closure, right? This is like the closure is kind of accelerating now. It's funny. We were just talking about that this weekend. We had a couple of friends. I had a high school friend that came and hung out with us on Friday, and my fiance had an elementary school friend that was in Austin from Idaho. And we were all talking about how, it just feels kind of like this weird energy. For me, I was calling it like a post-election kind of funk and just kind of figuring things out, recalibrating. And then I was like, wait a second, it's the end of the year. So we're also planning to go visit our families and, celebrate the holiday. So that, I think that plays a part in it. And I have not had a chance yet to reflect on, the last few months. So I'm going to take that as the universe telling me that to take some time and space. So thank you. My good news, I'm going to go with work-related good news. And it's going to sound like bad news, but it's good news. And that is it's been a challenging month or maybe 2 months. It's hard to fully zoom out. And as I just said, I haven't really had a chance to do that yet. But there have been things don't always play out the way you expect as an entrepreneur, and there are curveballs just looming right around the corner. And it feels like we've gone through some of those. Nothing terrible, but it is, you do a lot of work as an entrepreneur, a creator, and sometimes you see the ROI on that work immediately. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes there is no ROI, and that's why this thing is so hard. And I have to remind myself of that. And so my good news is, like, there have been a couple of things that didn't exactly play out how I was hoping, and there may be some ahead of us, but everything is good. Like, we still have, like, the net is there's still a bunch of exciting things that we are working on. And I think, today I'm going to take that. I'm going to take the fact that we have a lot of cool things that we're working on. That's all I
Love
got
that,
today.
Stephen. Thank you. No. Thank you for sharing that, Stephen, because you're right. As an entrepreneur myself, and I'll be full transparency, I just met my CPA yesterday, which, that's the reality check. Check. As an entrepreneur, when you meet with your CPA, meet with your team, and to your point, you look at where the rubber met the road, for this year, for this month. There's some positives, but to your point, I love what you said around seeds. Sowing seeds. I recently shared something where the reality is there are seeds that we sow in many different ways, especially as entrepreneurs. We meet people, we coach people, we mentor people, we encourage people, we do the work. But that doesn't always yield an immediate financial return, because as entrepreneurs, we're building something. But what I've learned, Stephen, and I'm sure you and Daniel can appreciate this, is I've seen those seeds yield a harvest years down the line, right? And in various ways that I didn't even expect. So I just wanted to say that is a beautiful, good news reminder that the seeds we sow today may not yield fruit or harvest in a month or 6 months or in a year. But at some point, something will happen and you're like, that's from a conversation a few years ago. So thank you for that reminder. That was really good news. Thank you for that reminder.
And I'm going to build off of that for my good news story. So, a seed that was planted maybe 2.5 years ago with somebody that was a guest on the show, they've since been on the show several times since then. They have a book that details their outlook on the people space and like how people teams should operate. And that seed has blossomed into this great relationship that we have with this person. And maybe in the next couple of months, that's going to be an official partnership between the modern people leader and this person. I'm not going to say the name of the person yet because we're still working on some things, but yeah, I'm very excited about that. I was reflecting on the year last week, and we've put out over like 85 episodes. We had on Brene Brown. We did really well the first half of the year revenue wise, and it slowed down a little bit. But the good news out of that was we quickly pivoted and tested new things. And to Stephen's point, some things we immediately saw results from, other things were a little bit slower, but we're figuring it out. Like I feel confident that regardless of what the modern people leader turns into eventually, it's going to be a success, and it might not be what we thought it was going to be 2 years ago or even 6 months ago, and that's okay. So yeah, that's my good news story.
It's
A lot of
usually
things to be
different.
excited for.
It's usually, as my 12 years into being an entrepreneur, it's almost always been different to what I originally thought. So that's a great reminder. Well, Robert, I'm going to keep this conversation going because like I said earlier, we have a lot that we want to cover. And so walk us through your story. We call this a Brene Brown question. Like, how did Robert H. Johnson Jr. become the author, storyteller, entrepreneur that we're talking to today?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And sometimes I think even in our pre-call, I like to go back because I think it's important for people to know that you didn't just show up as the professional that you are. And so a little bit about me personally that leads to the professional. Grew up in Miami, Florida. My mother raised me as a single parent. I was the first in my family to go to college, the first in my family to enter corporate America, the first in my family to start a business, to be an entrepreneur. And so I come from an experience and a family of firsts, right? And so when you're the first, especially first generation, right? First doesn't always mean first generation, but when you're the first generation to do something different, it is very difficult, right? Because you don't have a blueprint, you don't have a template. And so that's how I have arrived to where I am today, is having to figure it out, being willing to roll up my sleeves, my pants to my knees and get dirty and figure it out. I started my career in retail management. I didn't expect to go there. I went to Florida Memorial University, which is an HBCU in Miami, Florida, which is also, again, where I grew up. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't have the support of the amazing faculty and staff at Florida Memorial University, Athena Jackson, Robert Turner, and so many others who mentored and cultivated a gift that they saw in me. And so when I moved into management and ultimately leadership through whether it was Sam's Club, Bank of America, Capital One, and other organizations, one, I was willing to understand how to do any job that was in my purview, right? Just because I'm the manager or the leader doesn't mean I just sit at the head of the class and expect the class to just do the work. I believe in being a student long enough to be the teacher, even if your title is teacher, right? Learn your students, understand what you expect of them. Learn your people, understand what you expect of them. And that's what I had. And I'm so grateful to have had coaches, mentors, and leaders who said, hey, Robert, we see you and we want to understand you. And I also believe it's because, again, I was willing to be humble enough to not know it all, but be willing to learn it all or as much as I could. And so moving from retail leadership to financial services leadership, from a branch manager to a district manager to a market manager to ultimately leaving financial services in a sales and service strategy role, I've had a beautiful experience. I'm very fortunate. I'm blessed. I'm not supposed to be here, right? Literally, where I come from, what I didn't have access to. But what I've also always had access to was a mother who said, a funny story, she would dress me so overdressed in kindergarten or elementary school. The teachers would ask her, why are you overdressing him, right? Why is he so dressed? And she said, I'm dressing my child for success. And the beautiful thing is she didn't have the blueprint. She didn't come from what she created in me to be. And so my story of how I got here is one, having a mother who gave me what she didn't have: resilience, love, support, encouragement, having coaches and mentors from high school, college, and then in my corporate career that believed in me, even when I failed. Because at the end of the day, a good career has a series of failures or mistakes, whatever pretty word you want to use, that gets you to the point of learning the lessons so that you can be the best leader that you can be. And so fast forward, about 7 years ago, decided to make the leap into entrepreneurship. I haven't made it to the dozen yet, so looking forward to that, Stephen. About 7 years ago, decided to make the leap. I was so passionate, which I think is beautiful, but you also have to eventually find out what is the purpose behind the passion, right? So often we say, follow your passion. I believe follow your purpose. And I've followed my purpose, and it's given me beautiful opportunities and experiences that have brought us here today to talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about. I hope that was not that was the long version of the 120-second question.
I love it. And I feel like that's the perfect segue into a book. So have you written this book? Are you writing this book now? Is it published? Like, tell me more about it. I wasn't on the prep call, so I'm eager to learn more.
No worries. And so, yes, I recently published my first book, Safe, Seen, Heard and Valued. And the book is really a series of lessons in micro form. I've talked to a lot of leaders over the last 20 years of a career who, one, have the best of intent to be learners, to invest in their development. But as we know, especially in 2024, time is of the essence, and leaders have minimal capacity. As much as many organizations say we believe in development, when does a leader have time to really step away, to read a book, from end to end, chapter to chapter? And so I wanted to create a resource from my years of experience to help leaders, one, create psychological safety. And I think that's such a big word that it confuses. And if we're just being really honest, it can turn people off. It's like, what is this psychological safety? It's another thing. And so what the book has done is establish what it is. Here are the pillars that it sits on, but here's also a framework, our 3 C's of community, to actually help you build and cultivate a culture in which people feel safe, seen, heard, and valued.
I love it. And so many times, Daniel and I have had, these are all concepts individually, what you just listed, those are all concepts we've talked about on this show. And so many times, Daniel and I have tried to, even during the conversations, during our podcast recordings, have tried to figure out how to sequence all the things that are involved in psychological safety and feeling valued and inclusion, because it feels like there is a relationship. Like there's no one concept that is like the concept. It's a lot of different things, and you got to practice them. It's not a mutually exclusive type of thing. You got to be doing all of them, and it can be very situational. And so I'm really looking forward to digging into that. You also have done a TED Talk. Is that right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, like, again, as you mentioned, there are some seasons that could be, a little less of a harvest. And then there are seasons where you have a plentiful harvest. And 2024 has been a season of plentiful harvest for us at RSJ Consulting Group. We have a conference that we do. This is our second year that we've done it, the Panoramic Experience. We have the book that was released just under a month and a half ago. And then we have the TED Talk that I did a couple months ago, which is still in post-production and will come out hopefully shortly, if not most certainly before the end of the year. And the TED Talk is entitled The Power of the Little L.
Well, and so I'm stopping you there because what we want to do is we want to have that like a TED Talk conversation, but rather than it being a presentation of sorts, we want to have a more conversational take on what you presented. And so let's start there. So the power of the little L. What is the little L? Is there a big L? Like, tell us more about the concept of the little L.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And so ultimately in the workplace, we all know there is a big L. It is the big position in the room that typically people are waiting to get direction from. Typically people are waiting to set the tone of the room or of the culture from. And so the big L leaders are your CEOs, your executives, your directors, and even, managers, right? Or would be considered big L. So the big L in essence is positional leaders, the ones that really have the titles that too often the little L leaders, which I'll expand on in just a moment, defer their almost power to. Mm-hmm. And I believe the little L, right, leader, the little L stands for the little leader. It is the person in the room who clearly stands on their set of values, virtues, beliefs, and even lives the culture of the organization, sometimes even more authentically, intentionally, and impactfully than the big L leaders. The people that show up with the positive attitude, the people that are always willing to do the extra work, the people that sometimes are undervalued, but always asked to take on the additional thing, and they do it gleefully, excitedly, and gratefully. The people that when there is a negative tone set by the big L leader, they actually go almost person by person to check in with people. They're the people that actually have the most trust on the team. I don't know if you've ever inherited a team. There's always an informal leader on that team. There's always someone that people look to say, oh, Daniel, what should we do? Should we embrace Robert as the new leader? Because Daniel has the credibility, has the trust, and has created psychological safety with his teammates and peers. So that's the difference between the big L positional and the little L personal leadership.
And when you think about little L leaders, I mean, I can think of a few people that I've worked with in the past that immediately come to mind. Do you have like anybody that comes to mind for you that you'd want to shout out?
Yeah, and actually, I would look at people that we weren't peers, but were on the team that maybe I inherited, or maybe I was blessed enough to move into that leadership position. I remember one of my first positions of leadership, I was a branch manager, and first time managing a branch, and which meant I had so much to learn. And the people in the branch obviously knew much, much more than I did, from the tellers to the bankers and the assistant manager. But there is a teller there. I'll never forget her. Her name is Kim. I should pay Kim how often I tell this story. She was a part-time teller. She was confident in who she was. She knew her job. She knew the people. They knew her. And I'll be honest, at first, I had a little bit of a struggle with Kim because, again, I'm outside in. She's been in the system. She's part-time. She loves it. Her family is her priority. She knew her values and she knew them so much. She became sort of a mother of the team, even though she was younger than some, older than some, younger than some. She cultivated a culture, even though she wasn't a manager, as a part-time teller in which people looked up to her. They respected her. They valued her. And this is how really I recognized the power of the little L 20 years ago. I would come into the branch every morning, first person there, set the tone, play music. And I thought I was doing it right, AKA. And she pulled me to the side one day and said, hey, Robert, we're doing well as a branch, but we don't know you. It's like you're a robot. You come in, yes, you're a nice person, but we just don't know you. And there's a disconnect. That, in essence, was the first time I recognized the power of the little L. She stood and confidently gave me feedback. How many people would feel as a part-time person to give their manager feedback? That's an example of the little L, right? Person. They don't require a title to actually own their experience, to own the experience of others, to speak up for others, let alone speak up for themselves. And so that was when I first was coached and then recognized, wow, this is a thing. And after that, it helped me to open up and take off that mask or shield of what we are taught management should look, feel, and sound like. And I really have to credit her for helping me to become more of an authentic leader because of that little yet big piece of feedback that she gave.
It's interesting. As soon as you walked us through the concept of the little L, the big L, like immediately, boom, I had individuals that were little L's in my career that I immediately like. I feel like we all know a little L, and we all, of course, know a big L. And what I want to dig into a little bit is, why should companies harness? Like, I feel like I know the answer to this, but based on the work you're doing, why should companies really invest in empowering or doubling? Why should we double down on the little L?
Great question. So in today's world, we come from, you and I, maybe not Daniel so much, right? I'll say me. I come from a generation, I'm a Gen Xer, of command and control, right? Do as I say, and that's your job. But what today's generation, today's workforce, and this is across generations, but Gen Z and millennials have really set the tone to reimagine what and how we work together. We have to have communication and collaboration. And collaboration requires the commitment, requires the belief, it requires the trust of everyone on that team in each other, not just in the big L leader. Because the reality is, if the big L changes, the machine shouldn't stop. The engine should still continue to flow. And when we double down in investing in those little L's, if you will, we actually benefit the organization in so many ways. You reduce negative attrition, you increase retention, you develop a pipeline of future leaders for the organization, and you don't have to look outside as much as knowing, wow, because we've equipped, empowered, and we are trusting and listening, which is one of the core tenets, right, of creating psychological safety and developing in the little L leader, is we have to listen to what they're saying. Because if I am the one doing the work, I am the one that is that much more connected to it, that if I make a recommendation, if it's working, I can help us figure out how to make it work better. If it's not working, I can help us figure out how to make it work much more efficiently. And so organizations in 2024 and beyond, because of the VUCA environment that we are in, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, have to create, I believe, in the companies that are thriving now and will continue to thrive, they create this culture in which there's a round table, not a square table. Every idea matters. Every voice matters.
I like that. I'm thinking about my wife's company, and she's been there for about 7 years. And I'm thinking about some of the little things that they've done for her throughout her time there that have helped to like nurture that little L leader in her from like year two. She works for a Japanese company. They flew her out to Japan to present to the board. And
Wow.
that was like this huge opportunity for her. A couple years later, they put her in this leadership development program for high potential women in the company. It was like a 12-week cohort. She learned so much from that. And then there's like the smaller things, like her boss forces her to give him feedback on calls, because for like months and months he would ask her like, any feedback for me, and she'd be like, oh no, like we're good. And then eventually he was like, no, like you need to start preparing, like before we have our one-on-one, think about feedback that you can give either me, the team, or the other leaders. And yeah, so when I think about like cultures that do a really good job of nurturing the little L leaders, I think about companies like hers. But I'm curious, like for you, what does that look like? Like what can companies be doing?
Yeah, I love that question because it's tactical. How do I do this? And I appreciate where your wife's manager went, because that's the first step. Whether you're new to an organization, you've been a part of an organization, new manager, existing manager, every one of us has the opportunity to do this. First and foremost, you have to have psychological safety with the individual that then establishes and creates psychological safety for the team. So first and foremost, we have to have team cultures, regardless of what the organizational culture is, because we know the org can have an ambition of being a culture, but not every team within the org is living that culture. Sales may have a high energy, infectious, I'm so excited to be a part of this org experience, where the developers might be stressed out and anxious because there's so much pressure on developing and sustaining what is, but developing what is next. How do we create, again, that same experience across the organization? I firmly believe the first thing that we do is establish psychological safety. Don't even allow me to have a voice. Encourage and set the expectation that your voice is essential. Two is give me opportunities to leverage that voice, not just in my current role, but in the team, right? Because I can have a one-on-one with you, Stephen, and say, hey, Stephen, how are you doing? What do you need? And you tell me, and I empower you in a singular way versus empowering you in a broad way. So for example, Stephen, I'm so happy that you gave me the feedback that my tone isn't always inspiring and motivational. That's letting me know I need to be adjusting and adapting to the message, to the environment. Can you, going forward, be that barometer for me? So whenever I present, Stephen, can you be that for me? Stephen, how would that make you feel?
I would feel engaged immediately. Like I don't even know what the work subject matter is, but I feel like I just went from like in a lull, just going through the motions to being like, okay, like now I'm engaged. Like something activated in me just then.
That's it. We have to activate the curiosity, the excitement, and the enjoyment, right? Also, accountability. I have said to Stephen, you can hold me accountable. I'm not just going to hold you accountable, Stephen. You can hold me accountable on how I show up on calls, right? So, one, establish psychological safety. Two, connect with the individual in a way that will inspire them, not just demonstrate holding them accountable. And then third, give them really there's the three E's. I should have started with this. I like to drive the three E's. If we want to create highly engaged, high performing cultures, this is the way to do it. I'm going to give you the cheat code right here, the Big Mac secret sauce. So there are three E's to creating a highly engaged, high performing organization. The first E is education. Teach people about their job, right? Give them everything they need to do in their job, the tools, resources, but also educate them on why that job matters. Give them opportunities to expand their knowledge. Daniel, you gave that great example. Your wife's manager connected with her, right? Gave her opportunities to learn, develop, and grow, right? And then gave her a responsibility. Give me feedback, right? So the first thing is education. Teach people and then give them opportunities to teach back, right? But also create that culture of accountability. The second one is experiences. What experiences can I give to Daniel that are different and differentiated just for Daniel, right? We have this program. Well, is that really different? Does it really cater to Daniel's specific interests, strengths, and career ambitions? So identify experiences that are going to make the employee experience very much individual and customized. We are no longer, again, in a cookie cutter world. People want more. So first is education, second is experience, and then the third E is exposure. Now that I've learned, right, you give me experiences to use what I've learned and to get great at my role. Who are the people, places, and opportunities that I need to be exposed to continue to drive my career, but also to look at what's next for me in my career? And so I love that triple E framework because it makes it simple for a leader. Am I doing these three things? Education, experience, and exposure.
Well, what's crazy to me is I know a little bit about the story Daniel was telling earlier, and I actually know a lot of details about the story because we talk about these things a lot and we share anecdotes about our lives. And I don't know all the details, but I know Daniel's wife, all these three E's happen because I remember him telling me like she's doing this program to level up whatever, continued education. She's going to Tokyo, presenting to the board members. So that first, I just wanted to quickly note that's kind of crazy. The story that I
She's on her second Japanese course right now too.
Wow.
That they're paying for, which is pretty sick.
That is pretty sick. So in 2008, Goldman Sachs, I thought I wanted to be an investment banker. I'm working at Goldman Sachs. These are all firsts in my family. And I'm living in New York, living the dream. And I was working in the HR mergers and acquisitions team. So we were working on, this is even before hedge funds were called hedge funds, but the Goldman Sachs was operating like a hedge fund. So they were using their balance sheet dollars to acquire these companies. And they sent me to a number of conferences because they were obsessed with finding out like, how do we, if you've spent any time in M&A, you'll know that one of the biggest deal breakers post close, like the deal has happened, one of the biggest contributors to the deal failing to live up to its ROI potential, it's culture. It was the parties, the interested parties weren't able to merge these two organizations in a way that was additive to the culture. And I went to a Mercer conference. I went to a conference executive board, which I think is Gartner now. And there were no great answers for like, how do you improve ROI, post-acquisition ROI through culture? And I my belief is there has to be cultural giants. That this is the what I call them. There has to be cultural giants in the organization that believe in the venture and genuinely want it to succeed because for both sides, right? They want it to succeed because they've been at the company and they have a vested interest in the company, and they believe in the future, and they believe the acquired company will be part of something bigger and better. But outside of that, and using words to describe it, I've never found a practical framework for how do you build cultural giants. And that seems, as I'm hearing you speak, one of the things I love about your framework is we're simplifying it. So rather than thinking about cultural giants, which is seems like a really hard individual to find, it's like we're putting an individual on a pedestal and we're saying like this person is special. It's almost looking at it the other way. Where the masses, the little people, and I'm not using that word in a diminishing way, but where are the individuals that are actually doing, they may not be viewed as a cultural giant, but they're literally being a giant in the work that they do every day in their little way, and in the way that they can contribute, they're doing this. And that to me is what's so powerful about what you're describing. I don't know if I'm just rambling here, if any of this makes sense to y'all, but that's what's kind of hitting for me right now.
No, no, no. One, I love that you said that because you're right. The companies typically do it exactly as you outlined it. We find the one person that we think exemplifies and embodies all of the characteristics and competencies that we believe our culture to be. But the reality is, it's never just one person. And if we're being very honest, sometimes the person that is the culture giant is only replicating behaviors that their manager, the senior leadership teams deem to be what success should look like in our culture. But rarely is it what culture actually is on the front lines. I mean, case in point, think about when you go to, well, we'll give two examples. McDonald's, right? And I worked at McDonald's when I was in high school, and it was a great experience. It was my first job. And I really, I guess now I'm saying maybe that's the first place I recognize the little L, the power of the little L, because if you want to see people that are empowered and don't care about like the big L leaders in terms of if we're doing it wrong or right, go into a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, because those folks on the front lines who have to deal with the customers complaining about this, or do you realize how much that in today's environment, like people who work on the front lines of any organization have to deal with, whether it's on the phones, whether it's on social media, whether it's in person, in the store, in the restaurant. And so it's rarely the manager that solves the problem. It is typically the person that is facing the problem literally, that knows, well, Robert's not going to approve this. Robert's not going to do that. But you know what? I am going to make a decision right now that even if it gets me in quote unquote trouble, it's the right thing to do. That's what the little L leaders do. They do the right thing because they know that customer in front of them, that employee to the left or to the right, AKA their teammate, needs it. Their teammate needs maybe a break. Their teammate needs to feel heard. Their teammate needs a buffer between them and the manager. And for whatever reason, the manager hasn't been able to connect with that individual. One, Chick-fil-A is an example of when you talk about culture.
They were like the first company I thought of when you were describing this.
Yes, their culture, top down, bottom up, left, right, is consistent. I've never been to a Chick-fil-A and said, is this a Chick-fil-A? I'm dumbfounded as to how Chick-fil-A has really done a phenomenal job at creating belief in the product, empowering the individual. I remember once I went to Chick-fil-A. I was in Texas. I was living in Dallas at the time. And something was wrong with my order. Something happened. Long story short, the person at the window said, "Hold on just a moment," took my bag, brought me fresh food, and then gave me, I don't remember what it was. I was so shocked. I said, this would never happen. I won't even throw any other names of restaurants. But Chick-fil-A has created a culture in which we don't need giant culture drivers. Everyone in our restaurant is a driver of the culture, lives the culture, and accountable for the culture. And so you were everything that you said was so spot on, especially when you talk about M&A. I remember, and I forget this sometimes, which is crazy, that I actually worked in it. 2008, I had my first M&A role, which was responsible for integrating the cultures. I was working at Bank of America, and they acquired LaSalle Bank in the Midwest. I was brought on as a change consultant to help merge the systems and the cultures. So you've helped me true back to that was really where you learn the power of culture, because the systems can work great. But if people don't believe in the systems, if people don't believe in the culture, if people think the values of the old or legacy organization were better than the values of the new or succeeding organization, you have this friction. But great leaders recognize we have to marry the two. We have to help the acquired feel just as special as the acquirer, right? It was hard work, but it really set the ground and foundation for me to do the work that we actually, Steve and Daniel, the three of us do on a daily basis.
So if somebody's listening to this podcast and maybe they aren't in a big L role yet, and maybe they feel like in some ways they are that little L leader, but they could be doing more. Like what are some of the characteristics of a little L leader? Like have you like gotten as granular to define like what exactly goes into being a little L leader, and how can I feel like even big L leaders could probably work on their little L leadership qualities.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like you have something to say.
No, Steven, did you want to add something before I chime in? Because it resonated with you, I can
And
see.
that's just like a plus one. I'm interested to hear what your response is to that.
Yeah, I love that because the reality is before I can be a successful, truly successful, impactful big L leader, it starts with being a little L leader. It starts with recognizing I stand on values, virtues, beliefs that should be additional to, not substitute the organization's values, beliefs, and or cultural stances. And what I mean by that is if we just want to be really, let's just be humans, right? It's important for me to be a leader in my life before I can be a leader within an organization. And that, what does that look like? It looks like discipline. It looks like being able to make sacrifices for the things that I say that I want in life. It means prioritizing and putting people first before me when it's more convenient for me to put me first. It means speaking up, standing up, and speaking out on things that really affect me, my family, my community, my workplace, and the world. So, to that question, which is such a great one, it's important for us to be little L leaders in our lives before we can effectively and successfully be big L positional leaders. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't get into big L positional leadership without having the personal leadership qualities. We've seen that, right? We've seen where people were maybe promoted too soon, or maybe people were hired into a role because they were good as an individual performer that, oh, automatically you're going to be able to lead a team, right? Nothing could be farther from the truth. But the litmus test, I believe, for big L leadership is what if we ask questions in the interview process about, tell me about, in your personal life, what leadership looks like for you. Tell me about the last time you spoke up within your friend group, within your community group, within your social, sphere of influence about something that was disparately impacting that community. what if we tapped into what each individual was doing in their daily lives to live their little L selves that influenced and helped us to understand how they could thrive in a big L, right, leadership role. Personally, I didn't recognize the power of that. But then when I didn't recognize the power of little L leadership until I traced back. Did I first begin to live what I believe to be little L virtues, right? And it really trued back to growing up. I was a latchkey kid. Growing up, my mom doesn't like when I say this because she just, disagrees with it. Back in the 90s and the 80s, you could you maybe shouldn't have, but your kid might have had to walk a couple miles to school, right? That level of independence and confidence and clarity as a young child, I believe influences and leads to being the leader as a person, individual, personal leadership. That only enables you to be that much more successful as a positional leader. So I know that was a very long answer, but I don't believe that the best big L leaders did not exemplify, right, little L leadership qualities in their personal life that were amplified in their work life. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that does resonate, and that's an interesting. So I think what I'm hearing you say is these little L concepts, or just these concepts that we're talking about in general, they not only do they create a positive impact on the work you do and the teams that you operate in at work, but they also contribute to your personal relationships and how you operate outside of work as well, or they can, right? I think that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and I think it's the other way. It's that, but reversed.
Yeah. Okay.
My personal life, people should know what I stand for. People should know what I believe in. People should feel encouraged and inspired by me, so much so that if I am looking to grow in my career and they ask the question, tell me about a time, which we know we hate that question, but it's just a part of the process. I don't have to depend on or search for work examples. I can give real life examples of how I stood up, spoke up, stepped up, and lived out, right, these competencies and or characteristics. So competencies, as an example, trust. Trust is a competency that we need in our personal and professional lives. Communication skills are a competency that we need in our personal and our professional lives. And so you got it. That if I'm doing it in one area of my life, it's highly unlikely that I'm not or can't do it in another area of my life.
And so I'm going to say something that might be a little spicy, but here we go. I'm just going to go for it. We live in a big L world. What's your reaction to that, Robert?
If I'm being honest,
this is real talk here. That's why I just came out. I was gonna sugarcoat it. We live in a big L world. What do you have to say about that?
We live in a big L world. It, as a human, it saddens me. Just as a person, it saddens me because in this big L world, we overlook the power of, as you said earlier, we both mean this in just a positive, not a negative, the little person. You know what I mean? We overlook the little person too often for the big, the flashy, the most visible, right? The whatever we deem big L should look and sound like. It saddens me in one way. And in the other way, I'm excited because we're also seeing how companies that and organizations and even societies that focus so much on the big L are seeing the negative consequences of focusing so much on the big L. I believe we're in an era in which we are shifting, and whether we want to or not. It's like climate change. If you believe in it or not, doesn't matter. We can see the effects of climate change. you just said it a moment ago. The weather in Austin is also, just getting to fall. The weather in Atlanta is just getting to fall, but fall started a month plus ago, right? Typically, we're cooler. We're in a warmer environment, not just in our climate, but in our corporate spaces. And if we don't empower, tap into the little L's who want to be there, the little L's who are motivated not just by the compensation package, but by the opportunity to build something great, to work with great people, to build a community, because we also know the reason why this concept is so important of the little L is because we are in a time where people feel the loneliest, where people feel the most disconnected, where people feel the least safe, seen, heard, and valued. So if we have the answers to the test, let's flip it, empower our Gen Z, prepare them, make sure obviously our alpha generation knows that even though you're in primary school right now, you are going to be the leaders of the world. I grew up in the I believe the children are our future generation.
Me
And
too.
I still believe that. And I still believe that. But I also believe that we all can adapt and adjust and grow. And so, yes, we're living in a big world, a big L world. But if we want this world to be and even become what we know it has the potential to be, we have to listen to what our Gen Zs are telling us. And they're right now resisting. They're saying, this isn't for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and here's the thing, like we wrote down, Daniel and I have our own internal outline that we use. We do everything asynchronous. It's how we keep things dialed in and tight. And we have a list of talking points, just the benefits of these concepts that we're talking about. Things like psychological safety, encouraging risk-taking and innovation, enhance accountability and discretionary effort. Believe it or not, some of these words are actually being used at my daughter's middle school and at my daughter's high school. And so they are much more well versed in this than I am. And they are expecting these things. And I also get, it saddens me also, because it saddens me that there is a chance that these young women get to a workplace that hasn't changed and isn't, their expectations and their realities there's a disconnect there. And I know the pain when your reality doesn't, when what you expect doesn't match the reality. And that can be a very painful thing to accept. And so for our little L's out there that are listening to this and they're like, damn, yeah, finally someone sees me. This is who I think I've been. I just never have been able to put words around it. Like, what are the words of encouragement? If they don't have the chance to read the book, what can you give them in this through this conversation to prop them up a little bit?
Yeah, listen, that's a big question, but what I would say is, first and foremost, you are seen. You may not recognize it today. Remember, we started this conversation saying that not every seed yields a harvest in the time that we want it to. So the reality is you are seen. Someone is seeing what you are doing. They may not be your manager. They may be someone 2 or 3 layers across from you, but someone does see you. And when you connect with the person that does, and again, it may not be your manager. That's just the reality of living in a big L world, right? It doesn't diminish your little L power. The reality is it doesn't diminish your little L power. So here's what I would say. Recognize that you are seen, and sometimes someone seeing you, it takes time to catch up to you, right? Maybe there's the right moment, the right opportunity. The second thing is, don't, as Stephen and I said, although we are saddened, we are also inspired by the potential. And you are the potential. You are what we aspire as an organization, as a community, as a world to be, especially if you have what I like to think of as the pain in your heart when something isn't flowing well in the organization that you know could be better. Your pain aligns with your purpose. What are you going to do about it, right? Don't wait for that big L position to do something about it. Speak up is the first step. Share it with as many people as you can across the organization. And if I'm going to be really, really honest, don't follow all of the corporate rules. One of the monikers that I adopted post corporate America was I am the corporate dropout. I was a corporate dropout before I left corporate America, and a corporatepreneur, right? A corporatepreneur is someone who operates their career as if they are the CEO of it. I am going to run this thing like it is a business. So anyone out there listening today that feels like lost or not supported, not seen, not safe, not heard or valued, ask yourself, am I showing up as a CEO of my career? Doesn't mean that, you get to change the entire organization overnight, but if you show up different, day by day, week by week, you will see people begin to respond to you differently, especially on your team, right? So show up as a corporatepreneur, the CEO, the owner operator of Daniel Huerta Incorporated. That means that I am, as I like to compare it to sports. We love sports, right? We are a sports world, whether it's football, F-U-T-B-O-L, or football, F-O-O-T-B-A-L-L here in the States. Remember, and this is provocative, but we're free agents. Remember, you can be traded at any point, but you can also initiate a trade. You can initiate a step up. You can pursue and be curious about something different. Here's the framework that's a big part of the book. It is the 3 C's of community. This is what I want everyone listening to do. Little L, big L, all listeners, right? Begin to adopt this framework. And some of you are already doing it. The 3 C's of community. The first one is curiosity. It's important that I'm curious about people. I'm curious about programs. I'm curious about our organization. But I'm first and foremost curious about me. Asking myself, what am I excited about? What am I interested in? What am I not? Have a conversation with yourself and do the same thing with others. Ask questions. What brought you here, Stephen? What made you do this? And how did you get here? Those conversations matter because that curiosity will lead you to identifying commonality, the things that we share in common. Maybe it's lived experiences. Maybe it's professional experiences. Maybe we went to the same high school. Maybe we, both attended a conference and maybe crossed paths and we didn't realize it. But once we identify the commonalities through curiosity, we create connection. Remember what I mentioned earlier and what the data shows today is that people feel less connected than ever before, personally as well as professionally. When we find connections, that's how we got here today and are having this conversation. We identified through curiosity what we shared in common. We built some connections on that. And now we are creating community. Right? The 3 C's, be curious, identify commonalities, build on those to create connections. And when we create connections with people, we therefore can create community.
I love that. I think this actually ties to the modern people leader origin story. I think before we started the podcast, I had personal revelation that I couldn't just wait for a big L to move my life forward, to get me where I wanted to go. And I think the little L in me was like, what can I do? How can I be a leader? How can I pave my own way if it's not through this traditional corporate route? And that was me reaching out to Steven and saying hey, we should do this podcast together. And through the hundreds of people that we've talked to on the show, we were curious, we found our commonalities. Through that, we built connection with all of our guests and our audience. And now we have this amazing community. And yeah, I never was able to put language to it, that the little L in me realized that yes, we do live in a big L world, but you can't just sit around and wait for a big L to grant you the power or make your wishes come true.
No one's going to give it to you.
That works. Exactly. Yeah.
No one. And Daniel, what I love about that is you just made it human. You just helped someone see through listening to what you just shared until you had your own aha moment that, wait, I have to do it. I have to have the discipline, the courage. It takes courage to be even a little, it takes less courage to be a positional leader than it does to be a little L leader, because you don't have the positional influence. You don't have the position to back you up. You just have to have the courage, the confidence, and dare I say, for me, faith. Faith is a cornerstone of the work that I do. It fuels me, it empowers me, it encourages me on in those dry seasons, right? In those conversations that I know I need to have with a client, because if I believe it is the right thing to do and the data reinforces that it's the right thing to do, that's really, you got to have belief, and then you got to have the data to support it. And I'll share this. I was recently with an organization where we did a book discussion around the Safe Seen, Heard and Valued book. And one of the questions that I asked them, because they're just seeing an erosion in their employee satisfaction, which many companies today are, right? We work with a lot of organizations, so we get to see. That's why they bring us in, right? To really try to help refresh, rebuild, and reimagine culture. Here's the question I want every big L leader, right? First, and then the little L leaders, because they get it. The little L leaders know the answer to this question. During the pandemic, two questions. What were your employee satisfaction numbers? On that call, they answered, oh, they were through the roof. So wait a minute. So we're talking today about how we can increase our employee satisfaction scores, right? They were just through the roof during the most difficult time of our global history. You know where I'm going, Steve, with this, right? Mm-hmm. The next question was, what did you do during the global pandemic that made people feel safe, seen, heard, and valued enough to let the data speak it and tell the story? Most of us have forgotten, many leaders have forgotten, that just 2 years ago, it was okay for people to have their children show up in a Zoom background. It was okay for people to step away to caregive. It was okay for people to step away because they needed a mental break. But now, 2 years later, return to office mandates, in here or else, do it this way. So wait a minute, we're having employee engagement whiplash. We demonstrated during the pandemic leadership, empathy, and emotional intelligence unlike ever before. But now, 2 years later, that's out the window for corporate profitability and back to business as usual. That's where we're seeing the pain in companies. We're asking employees to forget who we demonstrated an ability to be. And that is the best way to lose credibility with your employees and with your customers. It is the best way to see erosion in performance. It is the best way to see erosion in employee satisfaction. And unfortunately, it is the best way to see high attrition and turnover. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And we talked a lot about it on the show, so much so that we don't talk about it as much. But the whiplash, the pendulum swinging from side to side, the extreme positions only to do 180s, like there will be a day of reckoning for all of this. I personally feel that we were operating as individuals personally at work in a world that is painful right now. It's challenging. Things are tough. Businesses are shutting down. Entrepreneurs are really struggling to succeed. But the flip side isn't any better. People are miserable at work. And so I have faith that we're going to all get through this. And, the tides will rise again. And when they do, the question is going to be, how are we going to perceive these brands and these organizations that were so quick to flip-flop when the going was tough? And so with that, I'm going to stop myself, because I think we could, fill another hour podcast talking about that. And I know, because we've done that with other podcasts. But Robert, this has been an awesome conversation with you, but we're at that point where we do have to turn the corner, bring this conversation to a close. Our next segment is called rapid fire questions. We ask the same questions to every guest. You ready to do this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's go. How do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
The to me, I define a modern people leader as someone who is adaptable and doesn't just expect their team to be adaptable. One who is accountable and doesn't just expect the people they lead to be accountable. One who is inspirational and motivational, but also ambitious and creates a culture and an environment of belief that we can actually achieve the ambition. Some competencies that the modern people leader demonstrates to me: highly effective at communicating, highly collaborative with their teams, with their peers and their partners. They set the bar high in terms of creating the space where people feel safe, seen, heard, and valued. And they demonstrate psychological safety, not just in words, but in the actions that precede the words, that we are a culture in which everyone can feel safe, seen, heard, and valued.
And if you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
Wow. The 22-year-old me was just entering corporate America, never having that perspective. Uncertain, insecure. What I would tell the 22-year-old me is the same thing I tell every 22-year-old exiting college, exiting or entering the workforce, wherever you're entering it from, is remember what you are here to do. One, first and foremost, is deliver excellence in the job function. The second, though, is to create an experience for yourself that you deserve and that everyone around you deserves. Be curious about the things outside of your vertical, not just heads down. The last piece of advice I would give the 22-year-old me is just keep your head down and do hard work. No, keep your head up and do smart work, do curious work, and be vulnerable.
I love that. I love that. Next question. Is there anything you believe to be true about the world of work, but you don't have the data to support it?
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. Yeah, I believe, and I alluded to this earlier, which is also why I wrote the book, did the TED Talk. I believe that people at work have more power than organizations are willing to admit. I think that every person that walks through the doors of an organization, especially large companies that we tend to work with, should recognize that if there are 5,000 people in this organization and 500 of them, 10% are senior leaders or leaders, the business can't operate without the other 4,500. And once we recognize it as an individual and we galvanize to not demand, but to disrupt and create the culture that every one of us deserves, we are saying that we are without power. So my unscientific, non-data proven, lived experience and belief is that the employee, the frontline employee, the little L leader is the person that truly drives culture, drives customer experience, creates employee experience, and enables the leader to be successful. We need more of that. We need more of that reminder.
Love it.
Amen.
Love it.
Yeah. And last rapid fire question. Who do we need to talk to next? Like, is there anybody in your personal network, or maybe it's somebody that you follow on LinkedIn, or another TED Talk that you really admired and you were studying before you did yours? Like, who do we need to bring on next to the modern people leader?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. There's so many people. You've already had someone I greatly admire, Brene Brown, which congratulations. That was a wonderful conversation. I love that. And I'm honored to be a part of the modern people leader, Brene Brown legacy. There's a wonderful colleague. Her name is Jacqueline V. Twilly. Jacqueline is someone that is clear on their mission. Her mission is to help reduce the pay equity gap for women, and particularly women of color, particularly Black women, but all women, right? Because all ships rise when one, which is so amazing. We don't have time to dig into that, but she is an author. She's written several books on negotiating, resilience. She's making a global impact. She is someone that I admire, that I respect, that I think would add amazing value to the modern people leader community.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing, Robert. We are down to our final tradition on the show. We call it one word or phrase close. We all respond with a word or few that we want to close, just as we think about the last hour and change that we've spent together, how we want to wrap things up. And again, we like our guests to go first, so we'll hand it over to you.
One word or phrase.
Yeah.
My one word or phrase is my commitment to the work that I do. My commitment to every person, professional, and organization is to help you feel safe, seen, heard, and valued. First as a person, and then in whatever position that you hold in the organization. So that's my final word. I hope it flows in the vein of this segment. So
it's perfect. Do you want me to go next, Stephen?
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm going to go with one word. Usually I do a phrase. I'm going to go with faith, because I like that, Robert. Thank you for highlighting that earlier.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the phrase. I'm going to say, big L's, work on your little L. Like everybody's got to work on their little L.
We need to work on that little L game. That's for sure. Man, well, Robert, this did not disappoint. We literally had a catch up and we're like, hey, have you ever thought about podcasting? You're like, yeah, I'm down. And that brought us to this amazing, hour plus conversation we've had. You're now part of our community. We like to have our guests back. So if you would be open to do that, we would love to have you. But thank you so much for going through your TED Talk conversation, sharing more about your book. Before we drop, how, if people want to learn more, how can they find out more about your book?
Absolutely. First and foremost, you can check out my website, www.rhjconsultinggroup.com, and you can learn more about me, the work that I do, as well as the book. Second, let's connect. You can find me on LinkedIn, Robert H. Johnson Jr. As soon as you type that in, I most likely will be the first person that pops up. And those are really the best ways to connect on my website and on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for joining us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.